And then we have a really special guest that I'm very excited about, talking about one of my favorite things on the planet, which is language. And I'm going to let Cary introduce him because they are very good friends, and I couldn't do it as well as she could. So take it away, Cary.
Hey, I'm Cary Ellis, author of 21st Century Superhuman. And Ken, why don't you say hello too?
Hey everybody, I'm Ken and I'm a PR director of Evolved Ministry.
And Ken and I taught together the last few months, and we've been having a really great time doing Jedi trainings and getting the 21st Century Superhuman info out there. So these guest shows that we're doing are to showcase somebody who's doing work on the planet to help us activate our 21st Century Superhuman potential. So in the middle here, we've got Dr. Michael Ryce, who is a longtime friend of mine. We've been friends like, I don't know, 3 decades or something like that, quite a long time. Similar paths. We've had a lot of the same training, but Michael started out years ago being drawn into a document called the Khabouris manuscript, and it's one of the oldest known copies of an ancient Aramaic document. I'll let him tell you about it. But I feel really privileged to have been involved in Michael's work. It's made huge transformations in me, and I have the book 21st Century Superhuman, the mind section, covers a lot of the kinds of things that Michael talks about. So we find his work foundational to a lot of what we're doing. My life has changed, Ken's changed. We'll share that with you a little bit. Cami has as well, as a result of knowing this work. So Michael, why don't you go ahead and just share a little bit about who you are, how you got involved with the Khabouris manuscript, and why Aramaic is so important.
Well, my name is Michael Ryce, and I'm the author of a book called Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And What You Can Do About It. And the book is a free download from our website. It's actually out of print right now, but it's a free download from our website, which is whyagain.org. And it comes out of the first century Aramaic language. In our culture, we're told that the ancient scriptures, at least the ones best known in the West, are based in Greek. And they are anything but based in Greek thought. You know, if the original authors of those texts showed up in the average place where they're talking about the scriptures, they'd all say, that's all Greek to me. It's like, it just doesn't, most of it doesn't make any sense. When you go to the first century Aramaic language, all of a sudden, everything starts to make sense. And there are so many mistranslations. I like to do a little introduction where I set a scenario. Imagine that you, whoever you are in the audience, you are the best translator, let's say Russian into English and English into Russian in the world. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be in Miami doing a week of workshops at a center there, and a place called Universal Truth Center. So let's imagine we hear from a man from Russia who wants to come over to the workshops, and you're living in Miami, and I know you've got an extra room in your house. I say, hey, how about you pick this guy up at the airport when he flies in and translate for him, because I don't speak any Russian, and then maybe you can drop him off at the airport at the end of the week. You're all excited. Hey, I get to speak my favorite language and hang out with somebody that speaks it as a native tongue. And so we spend a week together. We have lunch once or twice. We go to dinner, and we just have a blast with this guy. It's a great week. And at the end of the week, when you're getting ready to take him back to the airport, I say, well, would you just let him know that I think he's really cool? And you turn to him in your best Russian and say, Michael thinks you've got a low body temperature. You translated my words perfectly. You didn't say a word about what I meant, but you translated my words perfectly. The Greeks, they had some awesome translators, and they probably translated many, many words perfectly, but most of it doesn't mean what was said, because the Aramaic language is an idiomatic language. And if you can't translate an idiom, you've just got to know what it means. So if I say you're really cool, in our culture, you know exactly what I mean, and I'm not talking about your body temperature. So the Greeks came into the Aramaic.
So what does an idiomatic language mean, Michael?
Idiomatic language means there are a lot of idioms in it, just like you're really cool. Another example, okay, here's a series of idioms. Now you're going to know exactly what I'm saying, but imagine that we're going to seal this in a time capsule and open this little story 2,000 years from now with people who speak English. We're not going to go through, what the Aramaic has is Aramaic to Greek to Latin to Old English to modern English. We're just going to go from language to language. So I'm going to describe my day at work. Here's what an idiomatic story would sound like. I went to the office this morning and I found myself in a pickle with my boss, and she canned me. I went to my desk and started to clean it out. I had to go to the can. I came back, finished cleaning out my desk, got home. My wife was in the kitchen canning, and I said, help me if you can. And I said, I can. Now, you know exactly what I just said, but imagine somebody 2,000 years ago trying to figure out, this guy's in a pickle with his boss. I mean, how do you put somebody in a pickle? What's that look like?
Even someone from another country would have a hard time with that.
Yes, because they don't understand the idioms. Yeah, so it is in the Aramaic. It's lost. There's so much, like one of the ones that Cary and I talked about this morning, there's a certain set of words that have been translated by the Greeks as the kingdom of heaven, which of course is some unattainable state that they pretend is off in some place in the sky, and you're going to go there after you die. If you go to the Aramaic, Yeshua says, hey, if somebody tells you it's over there or over there or over there, don't believe them. It's within you. And the words that have been translated as the kingdom of heaven mean the community of love. When you bring together people who are actually functioning as human beings, functioning out of their true human lives, then you've got the kingdom of heaven on earth. You've got the community of love. And so that's the whole bottom line.
We have these wonderful communities emerging and people starting to get, that our thoughts create our reality, that we are beings of love. And we are literally seeing that community of heaven emerging in what we call the emerging new earth. And it's a really beautiful kind of community that's sort of kind of a grassroots movement on the planet. And Ken was raised in a kind of a traditional church. I think what do you think, Ken? You've kind of really loved what you've picked up from Michael because it just shed so much light on what you grew up with.
Yeah, I mean, my experience, I grew up full Pentecostal, charismatic Christian, and was deeply involved in all of that for most of my life, up until I was about 17. So, all the journeying I've been on since I was about 18 when I left, and I started really researching all the other religions and everything. When I found the work that you were doing, when I found this process, it really tied it all in, because I mean, when you read the Bible as many times as I have, and you've gone through the process, you begin to see like these things that are just kind of off with it all, like the whole story, how it's all put together. It really makes no sense, and there's another meaning there, but you're right at the edge of grasping what they're trying to say. And so when you put the translation into fact that you found in the teachings, it really opens and sheds a whole new light on it.
Well, if you look at one word that fits in here that can tie what you're saying together, there's a really, this single word, just understanding this one word changes so many people's lives who come out of that fear-based mindset of sin. And the word sin in Aramaic is an archery term. When I pull up my bow and arrow and I fired at the target, if I missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper yelled sin. Now, in the past, whenever somebody who'd never heard that before thinks sin, they got this Greek, I'm a sinner, blah, blah, blah. That's my identity. I have to proclaim that's who I am in order to be saved. When you realize it's just an archery term and it means off the mark, then you realize it's energy that's off the mark. And now you've got some new brain cells. And what Yeshua, if you go back, Yeshua says, in order to understand what he's teaching, you have to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. I think we're fairly safe in assuming most everybody had what we call have the brain cells for sin is, I'm a sinner, I'm going to hell, blah, 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 terror, fear, all that stuff. And then they have new brain cells. Oh, it's an energy that's off the mark. If I put sin into my tissue structure, energy that doesn't belong there, I get sick, I die. Then, all of a sudden it starts to make sense. And with new brain cells, you've got the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and everything else you said from start to finish, A to Z, is a perfect, consistent whole and a coherent system of here's how the world works. And once you get to that, it's awesome.
Well, and that's why I think this is so important for everybody. I mean, especially people that are trying to clear out of the whole religious programming, because like Ken said, it helps you sort of make sense of all that really quickly. But even me, who was raised basically atheist and didn't start studying the world religions until I got into my 20s, I was always a big fan of words, because I was always really in tune to energy, and the words, you know, are energy vehicles basically. And when a word didn't match the energy, it was always very confusing for me. And when I started studying quantum grammar, and then, you know, through your work especially, all of the things that never made sense even outside of the religious paradigm, just in our communication alone, which all of us have to do as human beings on earth in this time and space, it really, you can't have harmony, you can't have these communities of love, you can't have any of the stuff that we're working to build in this new paradigm without that foundation, because we're not telepathic yet, we're not transmitting energy back and forth. So you have to get really clear with the way you speak, and you've got the key to that, and that's important. So I don't see anybody not benefiting from this.
Yeah, the root and the base of one's thinking. There's an interesting quote I came across from Einstein a couple days ago, which just says so much. And here's what he says. And this quote came out of an interview he was doing, where he was being interviewed about general relativity theory. So he answers some questions about general relativity theory, and then Einstein says to the interviewer, but there's something far more important than that. And here's what he says. I think the most important question facing humanity is the universe a friendly place? This is the first and most basic question all people must answer for themselves. For if we decide that the universe is an unfriendly place, then we will use all our technology, all our scientific discoveries, our natural resources to achieve safety and power by creating bigger walls to keep out the unfriendliness, and bigger weapons to destroy all that which is unfriendly. And I believe that we're getting to the place where technology is powerful enough that we may either completely isolate or destroy ourselves as well in this process. And he says, if we decide the universe is neither friendly or unfriendly, and that God is essentially playing dice with the universe, then we're simply victims to the random toss of the dice, and our lives have no real purpose or meaning. And then he goes on to say, but if we decide the universe is a friendly place, then we will use our technology, our scientific discoveries, and our natural resources to create tools and models for understanding that universe. God does not play dice with the universe. And here's Einstein saying, your decision will determine how you experience your world. Well, fortunately, we don't have to take all the technology and all the in order to figure out how it works. If you go back to the Aramaic, the whole layout is there. Here's how your body works. Here's how your mind works. Here's how your relationships works. Here's how your genitals work. Here's how your growing of food. It just lays it all out. Here's how the whole energy system works. It is not a theological language. The Aramaic is not a theological language, although at least 6 of the world's major religions come out of it. It's a physics language. It's a physiological language. It's a psychological language. It's a genetic language. When we have the brain cells, the eyes to see and the ears to hear, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that makes sense.
And imagine how the world's going to change when everybody's actually given the instructions on how to play the game. I mean, it's like trying to play Monopoly without the instructions. You can't win.
Exactly. Yep.
What's amazing is this is the language that Zoroaster and Buddha and Yeshua or Jesus all spoke in, taught in, and it literally contains the information to tell us how to operate appropriately in this world. Michael, I've heard you say a few times, if you change a culture's language, you can destroy the culture too. So I guess tell us about that after you tell us about the Aramaic.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that we're not sure the Buddha actually spoke Aramaic, but the root of the Buddha's language was Aramaic. You know, the culture, the travel from the Middle East down into the Indian subcontinent, brought the Aramaic language with it, and out of that grew the whole Indian culture. But the key in understanding it to me is that, again, without the brain cells, none of it makes sense. with the brain cells, the community of love. The wages of sin is death. Some theological threat, God's going to get you, with the set of brain cells that come from fear-based thinking that the universe is an unfriendly place, and especially the creator's out to get you. But then when you shift that and you go, oh, this is just how physiology works. If I put enough garbage energy that's off the mark in my structure, my cells are going to die. And enough cells might die, and I die. It's something I do to myself. I like to use the acronym SIN, self-inflicted nonsense. We do it to ourselves. And so one of the most basic things is determine who you are. Who are we? And, of course, you've heard me ask this question dozens and dozens of times. It's the opening question of our main workshop, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And we'll ask the question, how many have ever held a newborn? And put in a single word, describe for me in a single word the essence of your newborn. Everybody's answer. We've asked the question of tens of thousands of people all over the globe. Everybody's answer is always some variation on the theme of love. Why? Because everybody knows what human life is. It is love. And then we come into the game and the world starts to put its thumbprints on us. Its hostilities, its fears, its griefs, and its rages. And those energies elicit from our genes frequencies that aren't human. And by and large, human life has pretty much been disappeared from planet Earth. There's not much of it left. And so we have most of the people that we see walking and talking do not have the active presence of love in them. Therefore, they don't have a human life in them. They're automatons, and it's non-human. To me, the idea is, and the whole idea of first century Aramaic forgiveness, and why I've dedicated my life to that, is because forgiveness is how you go in and remove what never belonged. The controllers of the game don't want you to remove what they have purposely placed in you to keep you unconscious. So forgiveness became, by the Greeks, oh, you did something really terrible that caused all this pain inside me, but it's okay, I'll forgive you. I'll let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. And of course, I can let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me till the cows come home. That's not going to change what's happening inside of me. If we substitute the word remove for forgive, whenever you think forgiveness, to get out of the brainwash of the culture that keeps people in their trauma, think remove. So if I'm in turmoil and pain and I'm not experiencing my human life, if I have first century Aramaic forgiveness and I know how to do it, then I'm going to go inside myself and remove that non-human part of me and throw it out. Now, being free of it, I have more possibility that I'm going to get to live out of my human life, which is what everybody wants to do anyway. From the word go, everybody wants to live there.
So, Michael, it sounds like what you're saying is that in general, our thoughts that we're carrying around from our generations are creating conditions within ourselves as far as the level of our health and our cellular health goes, and in the world around us. How does that work? And what does building the brain cells mean? Well,
if I go back to the first century Aramaic language, and I look at this, the opening words in the book of John, we're told it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. In Aramaic, it doesn't say that. What it says is, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. So what I engage in the way of thought literally becomes my physiology. So that was what the physiologist Yeshua was saying 2,000 years ago. Now, come all the way forward, there's actually a video we carry in our product table that's called Mind Body Bioenergetics. There's a 1-hour interview with myself and at the station in New York, and there's a 1-hour interview with Bruce Lipton. And what Bruce Lipton is showing, cell biologists are showing, is that when you think of thought, that thought becomes a molecule, neuropeptide, circulates around in your structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches, and then that neuropeptide locks onto the cell. Now, what we're told is when it locks onto the cell, what the cell biologists are saying, and I think it's just a little off, the cell biologists are saying that then the cell replicates the neuropeptide. But actually what happens when it locks on, if I turn my hands around, you'll see that my fingers are inserted. And so I've actually inserted the energy of that neuropeptide in the cell. And with my limited senses, I call that little inserted part chemistry. And I think the cell's replicating, but actually the neuropeptide is actually landing on the cell and inserting itself and become part of the instruction set for the cell. If it's based in hostility, fear, hate, rage, guilt, grief, pain, and drama, then the cell starts to fail, starts to dysfunction. The cell is designed to be, as we are, designed to function, being plugged into love. If I don't have the brain cells for that, when I talk about building brain cells, I'm not talking about building new physical structure. I'm talking about the fact that every cell in your body, or so-called body, is designed to store information. And so the mind functions throughout every cell in the structure, and where I store information, I'm building brain cells. So it's not about new physical structure between our ears, it's the capacity of every cell in the structure to hold information. And when the information held is of a disintegrative nature, off the mark, sin, then the cell, because of the chemistry inserted into it by that mind energy, starts to deteriorate, it starts to fall apart. And of course, you get enough cells falling apart and you die. That's just part of the process. And when you start forgiving, that is, learning how to access the neuropeptide that's stuck in the cell, and you learn how to access it and pull it out of the cell and remove it, the cell is alleviated of the burden. It instantly, because it's an energy field, it instantly goes back to its perfect function, and you get to experience the neuropeptide that maybe, 10 generations ago was hidden away. You get to draw it out, and you get to expose it to love. When you expose it to love, the active presence of your human life, it dissolves and it disappears.
So it sounds like you're saying that our generational database basically is literally feeding into our state of being now. Is that correct?
Yeah. Your so-called body-mind unit is a multi-generational database, and it came with a full instruction set. If your genetics were, take a look on the planet right now. In the last 75 years, according to Columbia University, we've killed in excess of 175 million people. Pretty heavy-duty database. And so, if that's what's in our database, and there aren't too many people in the country whose database doesn't have that stuff in it, then when that stuff is activated, it tends to take over. It tends to run the whole thought system. Those neuropeptides, when activated or resonated again, tend to run the system. And, the person, the ancestor who watched somebody mowed down, there's a story in a book called The Gentle Art of Blessing. And there's a medical doctor who was in the concentration camps when they were first liberated in Nazi Germany. And, most everybody's emaciated, they're falling apart, they're just, it's a mess. And there's one guy who's strong, lots of muscle, and everybody loves him. So he figures, well, this guy obviously must have just come into the camps in the last few weeks because he's not dying like the rest of the people here. And then he gets an opportunity to meet him personally and talk to him. He was one of the first people in the camp. He was a lawyer in Poland, and the Nazis came into the town in which he lived, and they literally lined everybody in the town up against the wall and killed them, including his wife and 4 children. He was multilingual and a lawyer, so they wanted him. He begged to be killed, and they wouldn't kill him. And he told this medical doctor that when he watched his wife and his children being murdered by the Nazis, he made a decision. And the decision was that as a lawyer, he had seen what hate had done to people. And he decided that he was not going to go that path. Nothing to do with religion or theology or spirituality or anything else. He had just seen what hate did. And he made a decision that he was going to love. And he was 6 years in these concentration camps and as healthy as anybody outside the camps, the only person in the camp with that kind of health. When we're plugged into our source, we are designed literally. I'll oftentimes ask the question in the workshop, how many have got a device in your home, your office, your car, your shop that when you unplug it, it works really well? Like, there's no such device. I've had people who say, oh, on my cell phone. I can unplug it and it works. Well, let's pull the battery out. Let's pull this power supply, see how it works. Nothing works without a proper power supply. The human cell, the human mind, the human physiological device is designed to be plugged into love. When it's disconnected, it doesn't work. It's not human. Take a look around what's happening on the globe. And fortunately, from more and more places and more circles, human life is showing up. People aren't talking words about, I'm supposed to love my neighbor. People are functioning as human beings, as love. That's the difference of night and day. You take someone who has as its base, the base of its mind, you know, as Einstein said, the decision that the world is an unfriendly, terrible place, and then you tell that mind that it's supposed to function as love, that it's supposed to love people, then it will effort loving people, but at the root of its mind's output is insanity, hate, fear, rage, guilt. When you start forgiving that, then you find out that it's not about loving people. Actually, I suggest to people you never love anybody or attempt to love anybody ever again. It's a mistake. Again, Vladimir Lenin says, change the meaning of a culture's words and you can destroy the culture. When you get people believing that love is something they do to each other, they'll do all kinds of effort, but it isn't what we do to each other, it's what we are. It's a noun, it's not a verb. You tell people to go out and verb each other, and they live in hostility or fear, they'll say all kinds of nice words about, you know, I love my neighbor. Look, I went out and I worked at the food bank. And boy, did you see that SOB and how long his beard was and what kind of clothes he was wearing? It's like, no, we've got to function as love. It's got nothing to the command to love in the Greek translations, to love your neighbor, had nothing to do with your neighbor. To love the creator, nothing to do with the creator. It was about maintaining, actually the word that was used, it's been translated as love, is the word Rachma. And Rachma is the filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that is a gateway for bringing human life into the human form. If the gate's closed, and it's closed by the activity of hostility and fear, then you can tell that person to love as much as you want. There's no noun love in them, therefore they can chatter words and mouth words, but the actual presence of love isn't there. When you forgive what blocks the love, when you start activating this filter Rachma, then people function as love. Becomes a whole different game.
And that transition in between moving from what you're describing is basically an ego state of being egocentric, where we've been programmed to, be driven from this survival, fear, judgment kind of energy, versus a soul-centric kind of consciousness where you're driven from pure inspiration and pure positive energy. That in-between place, though, that bridge, which we love, we love minding the gap and getting people across the bridge on this show, gets a little tricky for people, because once they lose that motivation, you have to go from ambition to inspiration. And that's kind of hard for people who have been using that as their energy source their whole lives.
The tools.
Yeah. So do you have any practical advice for people on how to move into this love place without losing, it's hard to function in 3D when you're in that space, because 3D is so not driven from that space. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, navigating all of that, because that's about what we do on this show all the time, is try and give people tools for that kind of thing.
Well, it's all about waking up to who we are and functioning as who we are. And so the first order of business is to recognize that forgiveness has nothing to do with me letting you off the hook. Forgiveness is how I change the content of my mind. So if I'm brought up in an hostility and fear-based culture, and they're actually in that hostility and fear-based mind, there are two places to live from. There's what I like to call driven, and that is the internal energies that are put in. People are trained through fear. A lot of religious training is fear-based, and you got to do this and you got to do this, and it gets pounded in, and so people fall into a state called propitiation. And it's kind of a weird word that isn't used very often, but T.S. Eliot had a poem that helps me to remember what propitiation is, and he says, "It is the highest treason to do the right thing for the wrong reason." So we have all kinds of people that went, I had it pounded into me when I was a kid. I had to speak nice to people. And so I do it. I do the right thing. But underneath it is my rage and fear. So every time I speak nice to people, I create the disease of rage and fear. as opposed to doing the right thing for the right reason, understanding who we are. Oh, I speak nice to people because I maintain a condition of love in my mind. I maintain my human life, and human life embraces and cherishes people. It doesn't do what the hostility and fear-based mind does. And so understanding how that works, and the fastest way, the best way I know to get this filter Rachma active in the mind is to tap into the birth of a newborn, the holding, the first time one held a newborn. And what happens when you tap into that space is that instead of words and intellect, what you have is a direct experience. And that direct experience tends to open that filter. For people who don't have a newborn experience, I love to share mine. I got to catch my 2 children at home. They were birthed at home. And when my daughter was born, her head delivered into my hands, and people say, well, you know, baby can't focus for several days. My daughter focused with laser eyes into my eyes and grinned at me. And that just literally, it was several years later, my daughter's now in her 30s, it was several years later that I learned that one of the goals of some forms of Buddhist meditation is to get to a state of no mind. My daughter put me there like that. And I realized, that was one of my first deep experiences of the opening of that gateway. And so by holding a newborn and then looking into the newborn's face, literally making eye contact, imagine you've got that newborn there, making eye contact, and as you make eye contact, smile at the newborn. And in that smiling, allow the energy of your smile to flow up your face to the frontal lobes of the brain. Rachma engages. Then make that a daily practice until it's first nature, that everything you look at, you look out through that filter, and everything changes. So that would be a way to go about that. And then the thing that can knock the filter out of activity is any form of hostility or fear held in the genes or in the physiology when it's resonated by something in the world. So if I'm in that state of Rachma and somebody comes along in a rage and up comes my terror, then what I need to do, as opposed to the non-being world's idea, is, well, I just get rid of all these people who rage, then everything's going to be okay. So I'll just make war on them, kill them, and everything will be cool. See, like, because I have nothing to do with this. I'm just an innocent victim. I'll even forgive them for what they did to me. And that's all Greek philosophy. It's got nothing to do with first century Aramaic forgiveness. So if I notice that when somebody comes in a rage, I go into terror, then first of all, I realize that my terror is the cause of them coming to me with rage. I'm not the cause of their rage. I'm not responsible for their rage. But the fact that they're doing it in my face, I'm playing. I'm part of the game. I'm not independent of my world. So now I apply forgiveness to my rage, and it removes, or my terror, and it removes my terror. Now, I used to speak fairly regularly at the Global Science Conference out in Colorado. It goes back about 3 decades ago. A fellow named Marcel Vogel came one year. Marcel's a 23-year senior scientist from IBM, and many people are familiar with the Vogel crystals. That's Marcel Vogel's work. And Marcel had a camera that he brought with him that year that it was called a Delaware camera, and with that camera you could take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. Literally, the fact that we can recall something means there's an energy. Energy is motion. Everything that's in motion sets up an energy wave. If I set up an energy wave of terror, guess who's coming to dinner? We live in a world of resonance, and resonance means things move toward us that we're in resonance with. You know, in the simplest form, everybody's familiar with resonance. You hit a middle C tuning fork on a desk, you put it in front of the second middle C tuning fork, and the second tuning fork starts to move, starts to vibrate. But in an animate system, not only is there that exchange of energy, but the movement that's created in an animate system is there is movement toward. So if I have terror about rageful people, I'm literally setting up a high energy wave that says, hey, is there anybody in town who knows how to terrorize me? Hey, if there's anybody in the neighborhood who's coming by to visit, they may not know why they're coming by to visit. And they may not know why they went into that rage as soon as they saw me. They come into my space totally committed to being loving and nurturing, and all of a sudden, their mad banshee comes up. Why? Because I set out an instruction set that said, I need that. And when I remove forgive that instruction set from my mind, then the same person comes and there's no prompt for rage. And so we're participators in the world. Some people can bastardize this idea and turn around and say, well, of course it's your fault I'm doing this. See, Michael Ryce even said so. It's like, no, the person who's in rage is responsible for their rage. But if I find myself regularly pulling in people who rage, I've been through this one 87 different times with 42 different people. I'm the only one that was there every time. It's about me. And when I learn to go in and remove the prompt, the terror, the sadness, the grief, the fear, then by removal, by forgiveness, I no longer send that signal out. And my whole experience of life changes, internally and externally.
No doubt. I've experienced this myself when I started removing this stuff within me. I went from, having people just strangely act out in traffic against me for no apparent reason. Like someone would just drive by and flick me off. I'm like, what was that about? To I have nothing but pleasant experiences all the time, 24/7, 365 for as many years as I can remember now. Like I just don't have terrible energy exchanges with people, even though I just heard that they just blew up on somebody right before I ran into them. So I can totally testify to the truth behind all that. I did not know the mechanics, and I would love to study that camera more that you were talking about. Did you say Delaware camera?
There's a Brit named George Delaware. I believe it's D-E, second word, L-E, W-A-R-E. I think but there's a link on our website to his information.
I'll definitely check that out. It's amazing stuff right there.
It's interesting.
Go ahead and share what your website is too, Michael.
Yeah.
This is a camera that when you open the shutter, it doesn't take a picture of what's light energy that's bouncing off of the object in front of you. If you tune it properly, it's a tuned camera, then it picks up the frequencies coming from the object. So for instance, and people might say, oh, this doesn't make sense, but think about it from a point of view of everything's energy. If we listen to Einstein says, on such things as matter, we've been all wrong. What we've heretofore called matter is energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. And so you could take this camera, tune it properly, put an acorn in front of it, take a picture, and you get a picture of an oak tree.
That's so amazing. There's so many different kinds of sciences coming out now, from photography to quantum mechanics to, like you were talking about, the epigeneticists. They're all finding these same things. The wave to particle transition is being captured now in the scientific community. And I mean, I just love talking about it.
So we're literally living, as we talk in 21st century superhuman, we're literally living in an energy vehicle. This is a series of energetic patterns that we think we live in a body, and yet we're really made up of energetic patterns.
And energetic patterns you could also think of as information. Is your information based in love or fear?
And this is why
the world as a friendly place or a dangerous place. Then, as Einstein says, that's how you get to experience it, because that's the pattern that sets it up.
And every time you say the word forgiveness, I know it sets off an old definition in people's minds. And we just like to come back to that. The forgiveness process is about removing any data inside of ourselves outside of love, because that is creating in our world and bringing to us or letting us see around us situations that are outside of love.
Well, and even things as simple as like locking your doors and stuff. I used to leave my car running when I'd pull up to gas stations to go inside to buy something really quick in really bad neighborhoods, because I did a lot of traveling around in mental health, and a lot of those people live in poor neighborhoods. And even, my family would freak out when I would leave my doors open in my house and my windows open 24/7. I would leave for the weekend and just leave everything open. Like, I'm just like, it's not about that. Like, if I'm going to get robbed, it doesn't matter if my doors and windows are locked. It doesn't matter. It's about me. Like, I always understood that control. So even something as simple as that, like how you feel secure in your everyday life. Can you walk out in the middle of the street and not expect to get hit by a car? I mean, it's really like that literal about it.
Yeah, I love how he talked about, the basis of it is information, which is really what it is. We're in applied mathematics. It's like, I mean, it's information. Everything is sentient, everything has information, and it's all frequency, you know. I mean, this camera is now showing people what we already know, and what we're teaching people, that everything is energy and everything is frequency. And if you're based in that certain frequency, you're going to bring more of that into your life. So, I mean, these are real super solid tools that will totally move and shift your life, and help you operate, this system, this information. It's like a supercomputer, and we're in a supercomputer in a supercomputer. It's like,
Yeah, it's a micro to macro thing. It starts from the cells, which are little supercomputers, and you have soldier cells that build into your body and on up. And then we know people, Cary and I, and you too can know people that actually have devices very on the leading edge that can scan your body and determine which frequencies are out of sync with your human design and your stream of wellness, and re-entrain your system to correct those frequencies. And that's going to be the future of hospitals and clinics and things. It's not going to be treating symptoms, it's going to be treating frequencies and energy and getting everything back in alignment. And there's clinics over in the east now that are doing that are they're just pure energy clinics, and they have energy practitioners that were trained as doctors as well, but then they saw through the illusion and realized that, I can treat this cancer a lot better with, and it's the same thing Jesus or Yeshua did, holding people in the divine perfection blueprint, not allowing you to see them as diseased people or as, someone who's dying. You don't hold them in that energy. You see them as a perfect whole being. And if you're strong enough with your energy, you can actually affect their energy and get them back into that blueprint without them even really doing much change consciously. Though our work here now in the 21st century is for all of us to have a conscious shift, because we've done this before and then we've fallen asleep, and then we've done this before and then we've fallen asleep. And this time we're not going back to sleep. This time we're making sure every single person down to the frog in the jungle knows what's going on.
And along with what you're saying, Cami, is so important, is that we have these new amazing tools that can realign our frequencies and kind of give us a chance to know what that feels like, and then to go on and do our own inner work, which is the clearing process of any data inside of us outside of love. And the two really go hand in hand. It's so exciting that we have tools that can let us, move into these levels of well-being. But then in order to sustain it, we also have to know how to clear ourselves internally so that we're not creating new neuropeptides out of thoughts outside of love, or old neuropeptides of thoughts outside of love, and then reactivate, ourselves from our true being.
But until we have all of these external tools that we're talking about, this language is the most basic foundational tool that you can get in your toolbox right now. So we're gonna turn it back to the guy who's got the biggest toolbox of language that we've ever met. And, I know you have a whole list of bullet points for him, Cary, but I'd like to hear if there's anything, if there's anything you could recommend for people as far as just like minding their beta brain, we call it, or minding their monkey mind, as far as language goes. Like, how do you start to get control of the staying awake at the wheel when you're just so used to just being on autopilot with that? And your mic got muted when you got up, so you're going to have to unmute your mic. It's down on the bottom left-hand corner. There's a little microphone. Oh, nope, you're still muted. Either right under your pic. There you go. You're done. You're up.
Yeah, excuse me for leaving. My power supply went out on my computer. I was about to leave you because it was going to crash, so I had to go get another power supply. But if we were in an intensive and you asked that question, I would turn to the board and I'd write the words I always do when I get a question like that, and it's all of the above. It's at Heartland each summer, we do a 65-day intensive. And in 65 days, I'll present usually anywhere from 6, sometimes they're really, when the energy gets really moving, maybe 10 hours a day for 65 days straight. And all I ever talk about is how to do that. So every tool and the core, to me, one of the most important tools is that tool of forgiveness. And again, forgiveness has nothing to do with letting somebody else off the hook. If I find myself going to sleep at the wheel, I'm going to sleep at the wheel because there's unconsciousness in me. Now, most everybody wants to storm the gates. Most everybody, when they hear that's possible, want to be there yesterday. Or they want to go find some kind of magic to take care of them. Somebody else is going to fix it. Millions of people are stuck in the Jesus cult. When if you go back to his words, and people in the Jesus cult don't want to hear Yeshua's actual words, he says, if I come in my own name, I'm a false prophet. I come in the name of him who sent me. And I'm here to connect you with this energetic underlying field of love in which we live, move, and have our being. That's what's important. And the thing that blocks you is what you hold in your mind and your genes. Nobody's going to come along and fix that for us. People can, as you say, support us. Someone who's really powerful in their being can focus into the being of another and help to draw that in. But as Cary said, that person's still going to have to do their work. Everybody wants a magic pill. Everybody wants to storm the gates. Nobody's storming the gates. Everybody's going to have to take the time and do the dedication that it takes to work through what is in them that is less than love. And so forgiveness is the first and most important. So last night we did a workshop called Communication. Did you hear what I think I said? Tonight we're doing codependence to interdependence. If there's anybody that's in the St. Petersburg, Florida area, we've got a free open workshop. My wife and I travel from 6 to 10 months of the year. Our workshops are free. Excuse me. And we go anywhere on the planet we're invited. We pay our own expenses. And so, people are welcome to come and join us. And to get the forgiveness technology, there are 2 ways. Well, actually, there are many ways to do it. But people can go to our website, whyagain.org, click on the bullseye in the middle of the page. When you click on that bullseye, it will open a whole series of links. That will explain the whole forgiveness process. It'll give you chapter 24 of my book. There's another place you can click and download the whole book from the website free in actually about a half a dozen different languages. And then the second link is the worksheet process. So people can click on that second link, and there are several different worksheets available there, different versions of the worksheet. The first one on the line is the latest one we suggest people use. And then the third link, when they click it, will open, and there are at least 14 different MP3s there where we walk somebody through the whole forgiveness process. So there's full instructions, 14 different sets, each one, of course, a little different theme and a little different variation with the individuals that we're doing that worksheet with. But we're walking people live through the process. So there are those 14 different sets of instructions for how to work through the forgiveness process. And then 5 days a week from 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern time, people can call into our radio show or go to our radio show online. And that the link is on our website, whyagain.org. Or most people, especially people in the States or Canada, they have unlimited long distance, so they just call in, and the phone number for the show is 646-200-4169. And then, so 5 days a week, we're there for a personal conversation, for people to ask questions on how does this work? What do I do? I'm stuck on step 3 in the worksheet. What do I do with it? And so we want people to be outrageously successful, and all that support is free. If people want to support us, they can also pay for the work. We do have DVDs and CDs and our tape catalog on the website, so they can order a 2-hour DVD of Why Is This Happening to Me Again, or a 4-hour CD, or the book on CD, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, on CD. So there's a catalog there people can order from and have that material. And then our radio show, actually, we're just getting ready to go into our 5th year. And so we've got, somewhere around 1,000 shows, 1,000 hours of material, which is just like the conversation we're just having. That's what we do every day on our radio show, and answer people's questions from all over the globe. And so that's available on our website, and the archives are free MP3 downloads. And so there are lots of ways to get support for it. And then out of that original workshop, which I started teaching about 40 years ago, have grown a whole series of tools that we've developed out of the first century Aramaic. So there's healing through relationships, there's communication, and still point breathing. So there's a whole series of different workshops that have different tools, and that's all, of course, those are in the catalog. And throughout the radio show, we've talked about all of those topics over the last 4 years. And so they're free downloads.
I'd like to just say, Michael, how amazing it is that, I mean, just to tell our audience, as long as I've known Michael, I consider him to be somebody with one of those minds that can go into such intricate detail on things and unwind it in a really extraordinary way. And because Michael was on this path of truth, he just kept going in deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, as we call it. And it's amazing how you unwound this puzzle from the Aramaic. And I know that you had a whole panel of translators that you were basically moderator for. So they were going out and they would go out and agree upon a certain sentence or phrase or paragraph on the meaning of it. And then you began having these light bulbs going on in your brain as to what this meant, and realized the impact of this language and what it's teaching and carrying within it on our entire culture. And I have done literally thousands of Michael's worksheets, and over a several year period, listen to the radio shows, put them on my phone, the archived radio shows, and just listen to them for hours and hours and hours when I'd be walking or doing manual kind of work. And in immersing myself in this process has literally changed my neurobiology. I remember I used to be doing worksheets and thinking, wow, am I ever going to get to the point where this is going to change me? And all of a sudden, one day, I started realizing I was standing in a completely different position in relationship to life than I ever had been. And it's what really, one of the major things coming together with understanding the shift of the ages that made the light go on in me, that made me go ahead and write 21st Century Superhuman, which was a 500-page book and a kind of a profound download about where we are in our culture, what we really need to get to live as the beings that we were created to be. So all of that to just say, it's just so amazing to me, and I'm so grateful and excited, you know, that you continued down the path and you unraveled this puzzle from getting in touch with this amazing language. It's really a language of the quantum physics of our being.
I think it's important for our listeners to know that that happens. You become a 21st century superhuman by living on that love frequency that Michael's talking about. So the reason he's able to do these kinds of amazing things, the reason Cary was able to do the amazing thing with her work, the reason all of us are able to be and do at the level that we're at is because we're staying on that frequency. And when you're on that frequency, the guidance comes, the resources come, the soul intelligence just pours out of you. You tap into the greater expansive consciousness.
Yes, for sure. And Cary, I want to just throw in one correction. I actually wasn't the moderator of that panel that was doing the translation work. That was my partner. His name was Dan McDougall. They called him Mr. Mac, and he's passed now. What my job has been in the process, you know, in order for the foundation to assert that it had an accurate translation, first of all, they had 25 translators. All 25 translators had to agree on the meaning of a word. And then the word would be taken into the laboratory, the classroom. And if it worked, then the translation was considered accurate. If it didn't work, then it wasn't accurate. It had to go back to the drawing board. And so my part was to take it into the laboratory, the classroom. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 35 years. And I just feel so awesomely blessed that that I've gotten to work with the first century words of the man named Yeshua. And, you know, he wasn't a religious figure. He just knew how the whole game worked, exactly as Einstein said. We will put our resources into understanding how the world around us works. And he had that down pat. And then the Greeks came along, and, the Greeks weren't very much about people having liberty. The Greek gods, they were pretty heavy-duty set of dudes, rape their own mothers, kill their own children, all kinds of crazy stuff. So when you go from the mindset, actually we're in St. Petersburg, Florida right now. We were up in Tampa last week, and about 6 years ago now, maybe a little more, maybe it's longer than that, the movie 300 came out. And Jeannie and I are movie buffs. We like to go to movies. That's when we're in intense travel, we take time and catch movies. And so the movie 300 came out, and we decided to go see it. And, it just so powerfully speaks of the Greek mindset. Here's this young man who's destined to be a king, and he's 7 or 8, 9 years of age, and, he's in his mother's home and embraced in love. And then his father decides it's time for him to be trained as to how to be a hero. And he's torn out of his mother's home. And in the next scene, he's pounding another 8-year-old boy's face into the dirt. And he's being molded into a hero, one of the 300. And that's the basic mindset of the Greeks. Listen to Einstein. Decide the world isn't a friendly place, and you'll build fortresses to protect yourself in. And you'll call the men who learn how to kill heroes.
And the Greeks were the ones who took the original Aramaic and translated it into a lot of what backs up our modern day Bible. Is that correct?
Yes, and if I put on a set of pink glasses, everything's going to look pink. Doesn't mean anything is pink out there, but my glasses make it look that way. You take that mindset of, we take little boys at 8 years of age and teach them to pound the face of other little boys in and kill and slaughter and maim and do it by the thousands, and we call those guys heroes. When you put that set of glasses on, all of a sudden, what does the teaching of a man who says, love those who hate you, do good to those who despitefully use you, become? It becomes something it is not. Well, excuse me, we went from that movie, and there's an awesome IMAX theater that's right up over your head. And that day just happened to be, the timing was right, and Jeannie and I decided to do a double header. So we left 300, and we went to see the movie Mystic India, which since it came out, you haven't been able to buy it. And just the last few months, Amazon's been carrying it. It's an awesome film. It's a true story about a young boy. He's 7 or 8 years of age, and he's Hindu, and he knows why he's here. And he's here to be a master. And at about 8 years of age, he goes out his back door to the river. He knows that if he walks away from his house, the family will follow him and drag him back. But he knows what he's supposed to do. So he goes to this raging river and jumps in the river, washes downstream. Nobody can follow him. He gets out, and for 17 years, he walks around India and teaches people who they are. There's one particular scene that I remember where he goes to this village, and everybody's in terror because sunset is coming, and he's sitting meditating, and the priests come to him and say, come into our temple, we'll protect you. There's a man-eating tiger loose here. And this young boy looks at the priest and says, can your temple protect me from death? And the priest said, well, no, of course not. And in frustration walks away. And the kid sits and meditates, and of course the tiger comes. And this is, true story. The tiger lays down and is docile at his feet, and there's no more man-eating happening. He changes the game. So this kid spends 17 years before he finally settles somewhere and is a well-known saint in India. And what clicked for me as those two were juxtaposed and we went from one to the other was, how different would our world be if the teachings of Yeshua had come through that filter instead of the Greek filter?
Interesting. I'm just having this flash. The scrolls that I was led to in Peru talk about India carrying forward a way of living and being that is part of what is going to get us on the right path, or I don't know exactly, but they see India as kind of a light bearer in the world. And just explaining those two different stories, it kind of clarifies that.
Yeah, it was a powerful experience for me to do one after the other and just kind of put them on. It's like, man, if only it had come through a different filter, we wouldn't have all this insanity,
So we've got a modern culture that's been built around war, and it's been built around us carrying around blame, fear, rage, hostility, judgment, and control inside of ourselves because we haven't known the proper definition of forgiveness, which was to clear that content out of ourselves.
Remove, yes. Think that the simplest way I've found for people to get it is, instead of thinking when someone says forgive that you're letting somebody else off the hook for what's going on inside of you, think remove what's going on inside of you and free yourself from it. And that's what forgiveness is about. And so if I interact with someone and I'm not able to maintain my human life, I'm in trouble. And people say, well, but did you see what they did? You know, what they did was so terrible. They deserved my rage. Isn't that obvious to you? And I look and I go, you know, I watched what they did. It was terrible. They deserve your rage. But that's not the question. The question is, do you deserve your rage? Because you get the original, they just get a carbon copy. And they may not be home for delivery. And so once you recognize that, it's like, I only want to engage in what I want to become, the chemistry in my cells. And that's all an inside job. Whatever somebody else is doing in the world, if I do that, you know, you look at, there's an interesting way to look at the whole process that happened out of the Garden of Gethsemane. And in Gethsemane, you know, Yeshua is told, he's been telling people eternal life is what it's about. And then he gets this guidance that he's getting ready to do his final exam and he's not sure he's ready. You know, the big weekend's coming. And so he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. He takes 3 of his disciples with him to hold the space. You know, he's in there a few minutes and he's like, the energy's gone. He goes up to them, he says, and they're all asleep. And asleep not being, but unconscious. They're blotto. And he says, can't you guys stay awake for an hour? Can't you be the love that for 3 years I've been training you to be for even 1 hour? They're blotto. He goes back into the garden. We're told he sweats blood. I see that from a naturopathic point of view as a huge detox. He's cleansing his structure of everything that would kill him. He steps back out, and now we see the scenario that, you know, is a replica of the world myth. And the world myth, according to the Greeks and everybody who's trained in that thought system, is the good guy kills the bad guy and is the hero. And, you know, everybody was introduced to that myth usually by the age of 3 by someone who loved them dearly. They read them a story of a wood chopper and a wolf, and they started building brain cells for very good guys, there are bad guys, and good guys kill bad guys, and that's how you become a hero. And people who live in that world of good guy, bad guy, and hero, you know, the solution is to become a killer. And you look at how that's governed our world and how that's happened. So Yeshua steps out of the garden, and of course there's Peter with his sword. And Peter is going to be the hero. He sees the good guy, Yeshua, the bad guy, the high priest servant, and he's going to be the hero. So he up with the sword and goes after the high priest servant's head. Fortunately, he just gets in here, and I can imagine that Yeshua might have given him the look and said, you know, Pete, that's not what we're here for. And then he gives Peter a message that the world still hasn't heard. If this one message could be heard and understood as it actually is, he says, Peter, if you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. It's just as simple as ABC. If that's the energy you live in, as Einstein said, if you decide that it's a dangerous world, then that's the world you're going to get to experience. And so he gives that message to Peter, and then he functions as a human being, as love. What does he do? His arch enemy is hurting. He's been injured. He had his ear cut off. He reaches over and he heals him. Now, other people who say, well, gee, Michael, you know, that doesn't look very smart. Did you notice that doing that got him dead? It's like, well, yeah, I noticed doing that got him dead. Did you notice they couldn't keep him that way? That's what he came to teach. He came to teach the power of functioning as a human being, of functioning as love, and even reaching out to the enemy in love. And when that happens, they can't kill you if there's no death in you. If there's no frequency of death, you can't destroy what doesn't have death in it already. And so forgiveness is about, how do I remove the death in me? What is death made of? Sin, energies that are off the mark, hate, fear, anger, rage, guilt, grief, pain, drama, trauma. And so if I find myself repeatedly in situations where I have that kind of energy going on, then it is on my shoulders as to whether or not I choose to go inside myself, take responsibility and forgive, or live in denial, which is blame everybody else. And when I live in denial, what happens is, and denial in this work we define as thinking or speaking as though somebody outside of us is the cause of something inside of us. So when I say, you made me mad, you hurt me, you really upset me, you really, then what I do is the part of my mind that's creating that experience, I have to dissociate from. I have to hide it from myself. Once I've hidden it, I will create a picture where you're responsible for what's going on inside of me, and I am now cut off from the part of my mind that I need to heal. I can no longer heal that part of my mind. It's not mine to heal. It's like putting a piece of information in a computer and putting a password on it and throwing the password away. You can't get at that information. When I think or speak as though somebody outside of me is the cause of something inside of me, I dissociate from that. And the password's forgiveness. And how Yeshua 2,000 years ago figured this out and understood how to do it, I don't know.
By meditating and tapping into the one mind. He did it the same way you're figuring out all you're figuring out, and you stay in the silence and the answers come to you. What I love about what you're saying is we see all these people living in this very disempowered way, because that's essentially what's going on, is disempowerment, when you're subject to the way the world acts rather than we call it being a programmer versus being the programmed. And I believe, and I know from my own experiences, that you can affect more change by living from that space. Not only can they not kill you, but you can actually affect more change, as the Ascended Masters did. They reached thousands of people, healed thousands of egos, millions of egos, billions over the span of time, by holding that frequency. And so, we see all these way showers and light workers and change agents just constantly wanting to rail up against the system and shed light on this bad thing that's going on and that bad thing that's going on. And that's okay, but you have to do it from a certain space. Otherwise, you're really becoming a tool for that frequency. You're only sort of empowering that energy. And you're not really healing the person that's done the bad thing. All you're doing, it's like you're becoming a starved person along with the others that are starving. And so I love what you're talking about, and the way that you're talking about it, I think, is making it clearer than any of us have been able to do it in our shows thus far. We are trying to get these concepts across constantly, but the way that you're doing it and the amount of time that you've put into the presentation is just, I'm in awe of what you're doing. I really, really love it.
Well, I've been working at it for the last 45 years and plan to continue until it becomes available, till we hit critical mass and it becomes available to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. And if there's anybody out there that wants us to present, communicate with us, go to our website, communicate with us. We go anywhere on the planet. Last year we were in 7 different countries. This year we're pretty much scheduled into tour through Florida. We'll be here in St. Pete for one more night tonight, and then we head to Miami. 2 weeks we'll be in Miami, then Fort Lauderdale, Pompano, Sebring. We're doing a 20-day teacher training based on this work in April in Orlando, Florida. Then we'll be in Atlanta. Actually, my wife Jeannie does a workshop called Healing the Whole Woman. And so she'll be doing a 9-day Healing the Whole Woman at the same time as I'm doing a 9-day Why Is This Happening to Me Again? That'll be concurrent. And then we'll go into teacher training in April in Florida. So anybody that wants to take your work to the next level, and then we head to Atlanta. Again, we're free open workshops when we're doing our travel workshops. The intensive is a fee-based thing because it's residential, there's food and all of that. But otherwise, our travel workshops, 98% of them are free. And then we'll be back at Heartland starting in July, and we'll be doing 65 days of workshops at Heartland this summer. And we do, again, they're fee-based because, of course, you can't run a center without some kind of cash flow. We do awesome gourmet, fresh and raw food, and we're also open if people are financially challenged to doing work exchange programs. So our commitment is to make the tools available, whatever it takes. And the practical aspect of getting into a space with a group of people, a community of heaven, people who are holding the space of love, and how that empowers each individual to reach depths that otherwise, on their own, they wouldn't reach in a million years. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's awesome. Awesome to participate and be part of that work that you're doing, Michael. And just the little conversation we were having previous to this about the how in the story of Yeshua and the crucifixion, that death could not touch him because he wasn't carrying anything around of death inside himself anymore. That's such I think, a really vital topic to the ascension dialogue that's going on the planet right now. So many awake souls are in this journey, and knowing that we are going through a major shift internally, and that we have the ability to operate in the fifth dimension, in these higher levels of consciousness, accelerated heart frequencies. And the key, this is the critical key, is us removing everything from ourselves that is not of love. And when we have let go of everything not of love, and we are not carrying death around inside us, we do have the capability of just ongoing eternal life. And powerful, 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 vital tool.
Yeah, you look from the point of view of physics, and we know that everything is energy, and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. If everything is energy, then you must be energy. I must be energy. We all are. Then we can't be created nor destroyed. But we can engage in frequencies that don't belong in the system and cause the system to fall apart. And, again, the wages of sin is death. Engaging in energies and frequencies that don't belong cause the system to fall apart. The energy remains, and if we stopped functioning out of the generational patterns of hostility and fear and stayed plugged into that active presence of love, there'd be no reason for physiology to degrade or fall apart.
So because we are in the journey of the 21st century superhuman, and what we talk about a lot is mastery in this world, what is our daily walk of mastery, and what are some tools to help us accomplish that? We'd love it if you'd share with us about the 5 smooth stones of David, and how that applies to our walk of mastery, and how that transitions us into living more fully these principles that you're talking about.
Right. Well, David and Goliath, that whole story is, again, a metaphor for human and non-human life. The non-human world, as Einstein spoke about in that quote I read earlier, it wants to go out and spend on technology and weapons that will protect it and make it big and strong and impenetrable. And that's, in essence, the story of Goliath. Goliath's 9 feet tall. He's got swords and shields and spears and helmets, and nobody will go on the battlefield with him. He's just such a formidable enemy. And along comes this little guy, David, who is not even big enough to wear armor. He's a shepherd boy. He's never been trained in war. And he says, I'll go do battle with Goliath. And he takes with him 5 smooth stones. Now, fortunately in this lifetime, are you breathing? What's happening? Go for it. What's happening?
I'm not sure. Just getting touched. Yes.
Something just popped and then. Yeah. Cool. Breathe with me.
You did that to me earlier too. I was like, you're about to make me cry right now.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, breathe, just breathe.
You go, Ken, thanks. Yeah.
What's coming up?
I guess it's just how it's the story of our world, it's the story of the world that we're in right now. Yeah. And how overwhelming it seems, and how people get caught up in that it is a big giant that we have to defend ourselves against, and this whole other path, how beautiful it is.
It's the healing of our world is why it's so overwhelming. That's, earlier when you about made me look like that. It's the
I made you look like that?
Yeah, right.
You brought up your stuff? Oh, good. Well, that's my job.
And it was just more about the appreciation of like somebody being so aligned with my knowing, and just having somebody be able to verbalize it so well. It's just the sheer bliss of that can be overwhelming.
I hear you. And Goliath is a puff of smoke. Big show, puff of smoke. Once confronted and approached, with the 5 smooth stones, Goliath falls over. He's dead from the little guy. And what are the 5 smooth stones? You know, what do shepherd boys do at night? They do the exact opposite of what you and I were taught when we were being educated in our school systems. And there's some interesting research that shows up in, it's either Magical Child or Magical Child Matures by Joseph Chilton Pierce. And he recounts what it takes, what the common link is with brilliant, happy children. And what he shows is that the common link with brilliant, happy children is that as kids, they had all had plenty of blank staring time. Yeah, when you and I sat in school and we were staring out the window, what does the teacher do? Get along with the ruler. Get back to work. We have a job for you to do. Don't you know you have to become a good commercial servant and serve the king? And that's, in essence, what the whole education, so-called educational system is about. And it's not education at all. The word educate comes from educare, means to draw out, doesn't mean to put in. Putting in is indoctrination. Education is drawing out the being that is there, and that's the purpose of this work, and empowering that being in expression in the world. So David is the shepherd boy. You know, what's he do at night?
Michael, I'll just jump in really quick and hold your thought and say the heart math monitor, which we've talked about in our other programs, has been teaching me that when I'm in my mind attempting to solve things with my mind, it's hard to turn the light green. But when I just give myself to the source field, to creator, to the creative flow of beingness, and I just put myself into that state, I can instantly turn that thing green and keep it green. And it's such an awesome state to be training myself to go into. And it's kind of like the shepherd boy, you know, being able to, or girl, being able to just sit and contemplate and be one with all that is, or like the energy work that Ken does, where we merge with the elements. When I'm merging with the elements, the light turns green when I do it with the heart math monitor. So fun modern tools that kind of confirm what you're saying there.
Well, and when we recognize that what we're trying to do is, with our minds, is figure it out. You know, tonight in Codependence, I'll talk about the 8 pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind. And number 1 pseudo-solution of the non-being mind is, if I could just figure this out, then everything will be okay. And you look around the whole globe and everybody's trying to figure it out, and you can't figure it out. You can forgive it, you can go inside and collapse it and be finished with it, but you can't figure it out. So Goliath has this blank staring, or David has this blank staring time, and he functions out of developed faculties that come from that state of meditation, that state of blank staring time. And so there are 5 smooth stones. Smooth stones because they're practiced, not, you know, as I started to say earlier, I fortunately have never been, had to engage in this game called war or any kind of anything to do with it. And so I don't know for sure, but logically, I would think that if I were going on a battlefield, I'd want the sharpest, most cutting stone. So I've had people say, oh no, the smooth stone will fly truer. Now, I think a good sharp rock or 2, if I wanted to do damage, that's how I do it. But David's got these 5 smooth stones, which are 5 practiced spiritual faculties that take apart the non-being mind. And, you know, kind of a way to understand Goliath is people who first start on this path will oftentimes go, oh, I got it. I'm love. You're love. How cool is that? You know, I've got this person home that's been a challenge in my life, and I'm going to go home tonight, and I'm going to tell her that I'm going to be love with her forevermore. And I mean it. And that's what I do, right? So the next time she gives me the look, the next time she gives me the look, up comes Goliath. I can say I'm going to do that till the cows come home, and every time Goliath, my hostility and fear-based mind is activated, it's going to come up, and it'll reach a level of amplitude energetically where it will take over. So how do you dissolve it? Well, 5 smooth stones, 5 practice faculties of the soul, of the being. The first one is reason. And one of the tricky things about it is that the non-being mind, Goliath's world, has a cheap copy. It has something that looks similar that you could almost get stuck in. So if you look at reason or choice, in the mind, we have resonance. Goliath's got resonance, and that looks kind of like the same thing. You know, if I say to people, well, don't think about the color of your car, what happens? Well, most people say, well, I'm thinking about the color of my car. Are you sure you're thinking about the color of your car? Or did I, with my voice, set up a frequency and cause that vibration in you about the color of your car to fire. It's got nothing to do with thinking. It's a pure resonance function. And that's all that Goliath has, is resonance. And in the real world, when Goliath presents us with a thought or a frequency, we can choose something different. We can choose to say, thank you, Goliath. If we've developed that faculty of choice, if we've strengthened that and made it our own, it's now a smooth stone. When Goliath presents something, I say, thank you very much, but I'm going to forgive that instead of follow your instructions. So that's what reason does. Goliath has just got resonance, brings up whatever it's got. You know, hostility and fear shows up, it's got a defense, it's got a way to protect itself. The second of the smooth stones is will. You know, Goliath's got willpower. I can force people, man. I got power. And Goliath's made the mistake of thinking that strength is power, and strength isn't power. The people who need bigger weapons are actually weakness masquerading as strength. And they find somebody to destroy, and you know, by cutting off another's head, they think that they are now a head taller, which is insane. But will is a gentle practiced faculty. We've actually spent a lot of time developing this set of tools. It's work we teach in our Laws of Living class. And will is the faculty of the soul which manages goals in the mind, and therefore manages the mind. If one does not have the faculty of will active, then that one does not manage their own mind, their mind manages them. And as Yeshua said, it's a despicable master. It's a great servant, but it's a despicable master, this mind. And so if one has a developed spiritual faculty of will, then they can manage Goliath. And Goliath is now the obedient servant, rather than the master who comes up with the rage and the guilt and the fear and, you know, his vengeance and his violence. And where Goliath runs to show people are in trouble. And that's basically what's happening on just about a global scale. The next faculty is the faculty of imagination. That is, it's the ability to image in a new frequency. When I can sit in that quiet space and be receptive, I will be able to tap into things that I have no rational way of knowing. If you listen to Einstein, he said that 90% of, only 10% of his work was intellect. 90% was imagination. And so we have this faculty of, when we can stop being hypnotized by the hostility and fear-based mind and looking down here in carbon-based memory in the past, and we can look up, we have a faculty with which we can bring in totally new solutions to everything. Every one of us is supposed to have that faculty. Now, do kings want you to have that faculty? No, that's why you got rapped on the knuckles with a ruler and said, get to work. You've got a job to do, don't you know? The king wants your services. It's like, thank you very much, I'll pass. Develop that faculty of imagination. And then, when we're available to the universe to be taught, there is our inner tutor, intuition. And if you think about, you know, the universe, let's imagine it's a 500 billion piece jigsaw puzzle. And we know that from the ancient scriptures, they tell us that the universe, or that the creator, is omnipresent, everywhere present throughout the universe. And then you recognize that, you know, from a physics point of view, what the physicists are saying is that every molecule in the universe is in continuous communication with every other molecule in the universe. So there is an energy coming from every molecule in the universe to us. If we're stuck in our story, we actually had a songwriter, Heartland, back in the early days, and he wrote a song called Stuck in My Story, My Pain and My Glory. And most people are stuck in their story. And my take is that, you know, for the sake of our analogy with a 500 billion piece jigsaw puzzle, is that non-humans throughout all of history have made up a story based on 5,000 pieces of the puzzle, and they're sticking to their story. And when we stick to the story that's been told by all of humanity, good guy kills bad guy is hero, dangerous world, got to protect yourself, got to have bigger weapons, got to spend all the, you know, the gross national income. What you don't spend on death care, you spend on weapons. then what happens is you create an insane society, which is pretty much what we've got. So if we are the offspring of that story, which all 5,000 pieces are from the past, everything from the past that replays obviously isn't present, isn't actually happening, though we experience it because it's replaying in our minds. So when I'm stuck in my story, my pain and my glory, I'm stuck in a lie. You go back to Yeshua, and he talks to the people who are in their hostility and fear-based minds, and he says, your father is the liar. He's the king of liars. There's no truth in him. There is no present moment experience in re-experiencing what's in brain cells from the past. And so we become offspring, the sons and daughters of man, Adamos, which means red clay. The 5,000 piece story, and I'm sticking to my story. But if we can forgive and collapse that story, in the moment where we collapse it, our inner tutor goes to work. And what we have is we have literally this energy coming from all 500 billion pieces of the puzzle ready to teach us. And as it teaches us, and we let that be the source of our thinking, we are now the sons and daughters of God. Now, if you go back to the Aramaic where they tell us that Yeshua was the only begotten son, that's what the Greeks say. Of course, they want proprietary rights. They want everybody on their side, in their pocket. But actually in Aramaic, it doesn't say the only begotten son. It says first begotten. He's one who opened the door and showed the way. And he says to everybody, things I do, you can do in greater. I've opened the door wide. Nobody can close it. It's open. The energetic pattern is open on the planet. Now, do you choose to do the work that it takes? And so when we're available, we can become, Yeshua says, I'm in this world. I'm in your 5,000 piece story. I got it. I see it. I've been exposed to it. But I'm not of it. It doesn't source me. What sources me is my Father. The 500 billion piece jigsaw puzzle, I am available to it, and it teaches me and it directs me. So now they call me the Son of God. And you're invited into the club. Everyone who is the offspring of that, rather than humanity's 5,000 piece story, is the offspring of the Creator directly. And in being that, we have now literally fulfilled our nature as human beings, as offspring of love. And that happens when we tap into our inner tutor that feeds us information from every molecule in the universe. If we're available to it and directed by it, then we live in a different world. And so, and as one engages in their work and cleans up, that's 4 of the 5 smooth stones. The 5th one is that as we clean up the database in this carbon-based memory system, if you talk to a modern-day physiologist, they'll tell you that your body's structure, its base element, is carbon. And the structure of the carbon atom is that there are 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons. 666. This is physics. They knew what they were talking about when they talked about the Antichrist. It is carbon-based memory with its hostility and fear and its 5,000 piece story that keeps us stuck in that story that is that which goes against living in the mind that Christ lived in, which is not a religious mind. It was the mind of love. That's all. He just functioned out of the mind of love. And so when we go in and we do the work that it takes, use the tools that he presented to clean up the database, carbon-based memory, then we have a mind in this carbon-based device. Goliath now is subdued, and Goliath gives us the truth. It can't give us the actual experience of what's happening out there in the world. That has to come from our intuition, our imagination. But what it does give us is then accurate and true information instead of the generational insanity. So they'd be the 5 smooth stones of David, and the way that Goliath is subdued, the mind that wants to run the game out of hostility and fear. And that seems uncontrollable. And so they'd be the 5 smooth stones. That makes sense for everybody? Is that a complete enough picture?
So perception, was perception the last one?
True perception. So we have perception, which is the mind giving us data from the past and teaching or telling us that it's actually what's happening out there rather than what's happening between our ears. That's perception. But when we clean up the database and engage in the 5 smooth stones, then we have true perception. That mind starts to feed us accurate information, and then it becomes the servant it was designed to be, and it does for us what it's designed to do.
I can just hear Cammie thinking, this is so awesome.
It is. I mean, the whole thing is just...
It is. It's
amazing.
like the story that we all need to be told and share just endlessly. It's so good. Ken, what do you think? You're Mr. Intuition, Imagination, Perception, and Will.
Yeah, well, these are all things that I have kind of had to, navigate and find out on my own. And when I came upon this work, was like blown away that it was all here in one package, and it was really what Jesus was teaching, which I kind of knew all along that there was something going on, that he was tapped into something, but it just got skewed.
Told you.
Yeah.
But we're told, don't listen to your intuition. You're not smart enough. You're a sinner. You have to go with what we say. And that's how to keep people shut down. And what Yeshua brought was a teaching to wake people up. But that, there's not a lot of money in that. I mean, if you can get them in that other camp, you got their genitals, you got their political vote, you got their money. It's a pretty cool game. Yeah,
you got them completely enslaved. It's just a good way of explaining how they have it set up and what they have. And I used to question everything, and that was just I was reprimanded, and they were like, "Whoa, this guy is," and what I was telling them was like totally contradicting what everyone was going about with. So it was like,
I used to know some folks in Alabama, and this goes back about 38 years ago, and there was a 12-year-old boy that was in one of these fear-based religious churches, and it didn't make sense to him, and he questioned it. The pastor of that church, because this 12-year-old boy was questioning, went to his parents. His parents took the kids to a psychiatrist, and they did electroshock on a 12-year-old boy because he was asking questions in church. I mean, you want to talk about enslavement. I mean, try to twist that one into being, this is love and this is a teaching of Yeshua. It's bizarre.
It's a bizarre thing. It really is. It's wild, and it gets deep like that. Like, I mean, there's churches like that all over that are really, they stick to it, and it was passed down, and it's so generational, and they're so locked into the hypnosis of it all.
Yeah,
that always baffled me, how they could be studying these texts their whole lives and miss that underlying message. Like, how do you spend every day, every week, one day at least a week, 5 days if you're really devout, studying these texts, and even though they've been hijacked and scrambled up, I have read those things. I got the energy from them right away, and it didn't take me having to study them for 20 years to get the energy from them. But how does that happen?
Well, when they said to Yeshua, what's the first law? What he said was, you must have Rachma for the Creator, for your neighbor, in order to maintain your human life. Now, the Greek translation is, you've got to love God, neighbor, and self. Not what it said. Aramaic is, you've got to have this condition, this filter in the frontal lobes of the brain. When you think of the Creator, when you think of neighbor, and neighbor means anybody that you think about, you got to maintain the condition of love in order to maintain your human life. And then he says, for upon this hangs the law and all its prophets. If you don't have that condition, if you don't have that filter, then that's the filter of pure white light, and you look at the text and you see what's actually there. Everybody who puts a pair of glasses on with hostility and fear, there are two other filters in the frontal lobes of the brain. One of them is hostility, one of them is fear. So if you look at that text, what Yeshua was saying is, here's how you get to the law and the prophets. You have the activity of love in your mind. If you don't, then you miss that. I actually started working on a new book called, at that time it was called 11 Most Important Words Ever Spoken. It was something I started out about, maybe 12 or 13 years ago, when I got the importance of that phrase that said, for upon this hangs the law and all its prophets. What Yeshua was saying is, this is the protocol for understanding what's in this book. If you don't get the protocol, then you don't get to understand what's in the book.
It's the pink.
Yeah, I started working on a book, and if people want to listen, the first 2 chapters are complete, and there's an MP3 download that's free that you can listen to the first 2 chapters. And it starts out with Yeshua, and it's kind of like my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, where I'm speaking to a character. Well, in this book, Yeshua is speaking to a character, unidentified, and he starts out and he says, "You realize they killed me twice. First, they killed my body, then they killed my teaching. I said, love those who hate you, do good to those who despitefully use you. But wrapped as they were in the commandments of men, they could not hear my words. It's time for my words to be heeded." And, and then he goes on in the book to explain his Aramaic meanings. And until we get to that condition of Rahma, we'll look at that book and we won't see what's in the book, we'll see what's in our brain cells about the book.
Yeah, this is very true because on my journey about a year ago, I was kind of coming into some senses, and all of a sudden I was like brought to read the Bible again. I was like, oh, I'm just going to read some of Jesus' text in here, and I saw them in a completely different light. There's actually a text in Matthew, I can't remember what chapter or what verse, but it says like, let the eye be single and the whole body be filled with light. Like something that was completely overmissed. I've read the Bible a few times, went to a full Christian school. I've read the Bible. But like he said, when you look through it through that perspective, when you have that perspective, you are going to see it in a certain way. And the fact that most people don't read their Bible, most Christians don't read their Bible, they just go to church and listen to whatever is preached to them. And whatever is preached to them is based in the fear, judgment, hostility. I mean, it's all about the fear.
Yeah.
It's all about the judgment. I mean,
I have a helicopter flying overhead.
And that's why I was basically atheist my whole life until I actually read it myself in my 20s, because, I was raised by a family that lives in love. They don't fight with each other. They don't do bad things to each other. They treat other people kindly, treat employees, whatever, with the utmost of grace and gratitude. And then I'd see these religious people acting all crazy and judgmental, and I didn't understand it. But I immediately got the energy when I read the Bible and all of the religious texts that I started studying in my 20s, and it was the pink glasses. Like, that's the perfect metaphor for what I could never understand how that happens.
Well, most people have never read the Bible. Even the people who sit with the book and their eyes scan the pages, they are reading what their mind says about the Bible.
Right.
They don't read the Bible at all. Until you have Rahma, the content of your mind is what you're seeing projected on those pages. Like, for instance,
The cultural and generational hypnosis.
Yeah. One of the examples I like to use, it's pretty crisp, I think, is, you'll hear people today even say, well, even Moses said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. My vengeance is appropriate. And through a mind of hostility or fear, it sounds like Moses says, go poke out their eye. But when you see that through a mind of love, what you see is these people were vicious. I mean, for the smallest infraction, they would wipe out, slaughter a whole community for the slightest infraction. So what Moses was doing was putting a limit on the retribution they could take. Okay, if somebody poked your eye out, then you can go poke their eye out. If somebody knocked your tooth out, you go. But that's all you can do. He's putting a limit on it. He's not giving permission. But again, read through a mind of hostility or fear, it looks like permission, and people are doing their violence and their viciousness at every turn. And it's insane.
Do you think it's going to take somebody actually rewriting the King James or whatever versions of the Bible in the correct terminology, or do you think this return of Christed consciousness, which religious people mistake as the return of the Messiah, I believe it's just going to be a return of the consciousness of love to the whole planet? We're all going to become ascended masters. Do you think it's going to take someone having to rewrite the Bible in a way that it's interpreted the way it was intended to be interpreted, or do you think the cosmic alignments are just going to take care of all of it?
Well, I don't think the cosmic alignments are going to take care of the people who are committed to hostility and fear. We actually have published a book called Enlightenment. That is what we've published so far from the translation work we've done on the Kabor's manuscript. And that book starts to look at what was really being said. And when people can turn away from their fear-based doctrine and dogma and start to see differently, they'll start shifting. But I think what it's going to take, and why I do what I do the way I do it, For 25 years, I've been on the road 6 to 10 months of the year. I go anywhere on the planet I'm invited. I pay my own expenses, and my workshops are free. And why do I do that? Because actually one line that the physicist Yeshua delivered 2,000 years ago, he said, a little leavening leavens the whole loaf. I think we can be safe in assuring that he wasn't being assured that he wasn't talking about bread. He was talking about humanity. And so when we hit a critical mass, when we get enough actual humans incarnated in these forms, then there is going to be an energetic pattern that will strengthen on the planet, and every form will automatically have that as an option. And they won't have to do what it takes to get there, because the energetic pattern is there, and they'll automatically start to tap into it. They'll automatically know what forgiveness is. They'll automatically start to go into the process and move that stuff out. And in a very short time period, they'll walk through the gate.
You know, we see that with a lot of younger people are attracted to the work that we're doing, and even 25 to 38-year-old age group. And they seem to have already come in with this sort of structure in their DNA to get this really fast. I mean, we tell them, they get it, and they don't seem to have to do as much work as some of the older generation. What I'd love to jump into, we've got about 15 minutes left, is we're living on the planet right now where we have really a huge amount of movement taking place that is good, that is people waking up. They're waking up to that we are love, that our thoughts create our reality, to this 21st century superhuman awareness. And but we've got this range, you know. One end of the spectrum of this kind of group of people is, well, let's do prayers and affirmations, you know, and the other end of the spectrum is, let's expose all the evil in the world, you know, and I think all of it is having beneficial effects, you know, when you take that whole spectrum. And yet, what advice would you give, and it's 11:44 right now on my clock, in no time, but what advice would you give to those of us who are out here in the field, in our thinking? How do we transition from the different extremes and the different, because I know, and as Cami mentioned earlier, in some ways, if we're putting all our focus on exposing war, we're then perpetuating war. What is the balance in your understanding of that? How we can move forward, some words of wisdom maybe for moving forward in light of this Aramaic. And then I think the story of Moses in the desert would be really a great way to tie that story up. Maybe I think that's got some really awesome key points that I've heard you tell. So,
right. Well, you know, the story of, you know, you look at that story and here's Moses wandering for 40 years. And you have to think logically, this is obviously a pretty bright group of people. How do you get lost in a 30 square mile area for 40 years? You know, it's just, it's ridiculous. Of course, you two as ladies know exactly why, right? Moses wouldn't stop and ask for directions. You know, Mrs. Moses asked 2 weeks later, they were in the promised land. But no, seriously, if you look at that story, you see that what had to happen to get out of the desert is the old generation had to die off. And generation doesn't mean everybody in old physical bodies. The root of the word is genari, it's cause. All of the causes held in the mind have to go. We have to do our work. And as we hit a critical mass of people who do that work, it's going to get easier and easier and easier for others to do their work. You know, the energy space is open. There's a neat parable that Yeshua tells about the guy who goes into the field at 8 o'clock in the morning and works and toils all day long in the hot sun, and somebody else comes in at 11, and somebody else comes in at 3, and somebody comes in at 4:30, and work is over at 5. And the paymaster pays the guy who came in at 4:30 the same wage as the guy who came in at 8. And the guy that came in at 8 in the morning goes, I worked and toiled all day in the hot sun, and this guy came in at a half an hour, and you're giving him the same as you're giving me. And you know, the story goes on to say, well, am I not giving you what I promised you? Isn't it my business if I choose to give the same to this person who's only worked a half an hour? And I think he's saying that, yeah, there'll be people who'll go through the gate early, and they'll, you know, there's going to be some slugging. There's some real work to do to understand this and to look at yourself and process through your own rage and guilt and grief and fear and pain. It's not an easy process. But each person who does that opens the gate so that those who come later have an easier time of stepping into that process. And so we each need to undo the generational patterns that have gone on. This multi-generational database has to have removed from it what never belonged in it. And hostility and fear simply never belonged. Then when it comes to, well, what about all the insanities in the world? Well, the insanities in the world are just a reflection of what's going on in the carbon-based memory of the people who are doing it. How do you heal what's in carbon-based memory? You shine the light of love on it. You bring the active presence of love. So if somebody's going to go out and protest because they're enraged about what this rage-filled person is doing, they are a contributor to what the rage-filled person that they're enraged with, they say they're enraged with, is doing. They're energetically supporting what's happening, even though in their heads they're saying, I'm against it. By having rage about it, they're actually supporting it. Yeshua called that a house divided against itself. So if in my head I'm saying one thing, but in my heart I'm actually contributing energy to it. I don't like, child slavery, but, I love chocolate, and I buy all the chocolate from the Sierra Leone that I can. Well, I'm a house divided against myself. I'm saying I don't like child slavery, but I'm buying chocolate from Sierra Leone where there's slave labor, children who are producing most of the chocolate that's sold by the big companies in America. So what I do is I bring an integritous, love-based mind to the insanity. If I choose to expose it, if it's my job to expose it, great, go out there and do it. But if you don't handle your own hostility or fear about it, then you're contributing to what you're trying to put an end to. When you put an end to it in you, I love how Gandhi said it, you must become the change you want to see in the world. If you haven't seen the movie Gandhi, there's a great scene in there where, he goes to his wife, are you breathing? Are you breathing? Next wave's coming up. Here we go.
You do well, girl.
It's terrible. I'm hoping nobody will see me. I'm too sensitive. Oh, God.
No, that's a thought. You might want to let go of that one. You're just right on.
I know.
And there's some sensitive places in you that can be touched and need to surface and be forgiven. That's all. We're here to support you. So we support you breathing. We breathe with you and touch those places in us too. That's cool.
I love what you're saying about, voting with your dollar is what I always say is the best kind of activism. Because if you're, preaching on the one hand, like you were saying, a house divided against itself, if you're preaching on the one hand that you hate, the oil industry and then this and that, and you're driving a Hummer or, like the chocolate metaphor that you use, the dollar is the best way you can vote for anything. And intentional consciousness is the second best way you can vote for anything. The almighty dollar will affect change much faster than standing anywhere with a picket sign. If everybody decided to stop supporting the companies and the industries and the everything that is perpetuating this craziness, this madness, it would disappear overnight. And then on the second hand, if you are going to be an activist on something, do it in a way that Gandhi would have done it. Like, instead of saying, well, what would Jesus do, it still pertains, but what would Gandhi do or what would Martin Luther King do should be common phrases with these activists, because, they're not affecting the kind of change that they want to be affecting. And just a little tweak in their approach would make such a huge difference.
Yeah, I always offer to people the best guideline to behavior I know of is go back to holding a newborn.
Yeah.
If you can imagine the newborn doing this behavior, go for it. If
Right.
you can't imagine the newborn doing it, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
Good scene, cool scene in Gandhi, the film where he's telling his wife to clean the latrines, and that's the work of untouchables, and he goes into a rage and he's going to throw her out of the house, and he stops and he's like, oh my God, what am I doing? He catches himself at his own rage and wanting to create a peaceful world, and he does his work so he can come back with the mind of love, with the human mind. And we have to, anything we want to change in the world, we have to change in ourselves first, and we have to be able to bring a human mind to it rather than a mind based in hostility or fear.
I had a lot of divine order in my life. I've been seeing that pattern since I was a child, and I actually watched that movie while I was tripping on acid. Talk about an activation. That was a crazy activation.
Yeah.
I just want to say yes, yes, and more yes. You're saying exactly what I tell people every day, which is don't go out and try to change the world. work on self-mastery, work on changing yourself and clearing out your data, and everything around you will change. Your reality will change. My reality has changed. It's personally changed in my life by doing this work without even talking to the people or people around me that I wanted it to change with. So right there shows you that it can shift. You don't even have to approach these people that are coming into your field or problems you have with family members. You can do the work and it will go. The reality will change. The parallel world will shift. You're living in one world, and that world you want is over here. You just have to align your frequency with it and get into it, because right now your frequency is aligned with all this stuff. You're merely resonating into the field. So well said. I mean, it's awesome stuff.
Yeah, actually, in the Aramaic, the word nafsha is the word that's been translated as soul, and that word can be properly translated a tuning mechanism. What do you choose to attune to or align with? That's it. And the first alignment is Rahma, filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that brings human life into human form. And when we do that, then we look at that book and we're not reading the content of our carbon-based memory from the past into the pages of that book anymore. We're actually reading the book and we go, oh, you know, he said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. He's trying to stop violence, rather than, oh, he's giving permission for violence. We start to see things as it originally was. And everything shifts, everything changes.
Beautiful.
Cool. Well, we're down to about 7 minutes. So anybody got a final thought that we might want to focus on? And I tell you what, if we don't have something, maybe we can just do a brief forgiveness meditation.
Oh, perfect.
That'd be awesome.
Talk a little bit about the forgiveness process, because, and you know, it's a 4-hour workshop, so you know, getting it in a few minutes is a difficult thing to do, but we can go into an experience of it. And I'll preface it by saying that in the Aramaic language, the word forgive is shabag or shabak, and the word means to cancel. And so you can't cancel somebody else. I guess you could. It's called murder. Not a nice thing to do. You can't cancel yourself. That's called suicide. You really don't want to go there. But if you understand what drives the perceptual output of your mind and keeps you in hostility or fear, you can cancel that. And when you cancel that, what happens is the perceptual mind that's filled with, look what they did to me, collapses. And when it collapses, it opens a pathway for us to go directly to the dissociated content that needs healing. The thing that drives perception is goals. Once you load a goal in your mind, you create a stress. When you have a stress, the functioning purpose of your mind is to show you how to achieve that goal. And when you achieve that goal, then you alleviate the stress. Or you can cancel the goal. So if I load a goal in my mind, and that goal causes my mind to use hostility or fear to build my guidance system, then my perception is defiled by that hostility or fear, and I'm in trouble because I just lost the presence of love. I just lost my human life. So without getting into a whole lot of information, again, people go to the website, click the bullseye, it's all there. But in essence, when I apply shabag, forgiveness, canceling, I look at the goal I hold for the object of attention. I want this corporation to be in integrity with what they do to the earth. And I'm enraged because they're not. So now I have rage, and I support that corporation with my rage. So what do? I recognize the thing that drives my rage, that accesses my file on rage, is the goal for that corporation to do integrity with the earth. So the essence of forgiveness is I cancel that goal. When I cancel that goal, what happens is my whole projection that it's about that corporation out there collapses. And when it collapses, it opens a pathway into the dissociated content that holds my rage. And then through that opening, I can bring my rage directly forward rather than project it into my brain's image of everybody that I think is out of integrity. And I realize this integrity issue is about me. I bring that integrity rage forward in the active presence of love. And what happens is the rage dissolves. I'm freed of it. That's Aramaic forgiveness. So if everybody wants to, we've got a couple of minutes. Let's just get quiet. Allow yourself to take a deep breath. And think about a situation in your life where you've got some form of hostility or fear. You'll notice you've never had hostility or fear at someone who you didn't have a goal for. The only time you have hostility towards someone is because you have a goal for them and they're not obeying or they're not fulfilling your goal. And so when you load that goal into your mind, if it causes your mind to use hostility and fear, then your perception is defiled and you're in trouble. So look at that situation that involves some irritation, some upset with somebody in your life, and identify specifically and precisely what it is you want from that object of attention. So let's say it's a parent who wants their child to speak to them, to stop speaking to them in derogatory terms. You got a child that's speaking abusively. And so now the average person would go into, well, I don't want my child to speak to me abusively anymore. But that's what you don't want. The non-being mind always knows what it doesn't want. We want to shift into, what do you want? Oh, I want my child to speak to me lovingly, gently, and respectfully. So now, recognizing that when I load the goal for my child to speak to me lovingly, gently, and respectfully, I go into rage, then I cancel my goal for my child to speak to me lovingly, gently, respectfully. So whatever the goal is you hold for the object of attention that you're thinking about, cancel that goal and just watch where your mind goes. What it will tend to do is to drop to the next level of unconsciousness where the core issue is hidden. And as you breathe and let that core issue come forward, hold to the active presence of love. Tap into that newborn energy. And when the unconscious pain meets the newborn energy, the active presence of love, what happens is it dissolves and forgiveness occurs. Your part in doing the process is to cancel the goal. And then, if you recognize you've got an issue that's bigger than just, some short-term thing that's going on in your world, maybe it's been going on for generations. What Yeshua taught about 2,000 years ago is that there was a, so to speak, super processor in us, a power that if we invited her, it was her feminine power, into activity, she would undo the effects of errors and teach us the truth. Her name was Ruka Dukudsha. The Greek translators the Holy Spirit. There's nothing about a disembodied spirit being. There is an elemental force in you. And so we're going to leave you with the idea of continuously inviting that elemental force that knows how to reach to the depth of your genetic toes, undo the effects of your errors, and teach you the truth. And the truth is, you're made of this stuff called love. And that's what we're here for. Namaste.